A very good evening and a warm welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us. As we start this show, we'll start with a short clip of what our transport sector currently looks like in the greater Kampala area, and then we'll get into an introduction of our guest for tonight. But what we'll be speaking about for tonight will be rethinking public transport regulations, the routes and the fares, and what needs to be done. Let's take a look at that clip and then we'll get into our discussion.
Public transport is bwenkimanyiiko transport egatta abantu bonna okuviira ku mwana omuto asoma abatana kufuna sente zigula motoka zaabwe.
Public transport eddukanyizibwa ffe bantu basekinoomu, eddukanyizibwa civilians.
Public transport eri control kubanga erina obukulembeze okuviira ddala wansi ku stage erina kyeyamaani waayo, erina n'olukiiko ab'empisa we bali, amateeka tutambulira mu mateeka.
Ffe tuteekawo ebisale bye tuba tugeresa okusinziira ku buwanvu bw'olugendo bwe tugenda okutwalamu abantu. Tuteekawo ebisale okusinziira ku mafuta obuseere bwe gaba galiko. Tubikola lwakuba bannaffe tusobola okubannyonnyola ne babitegeera ne bakkiriza. Then ab'emitwe eminene tetulina busobozi busobola kubakwatako. Awo gavumenti bwe yalibadde ejjira n'ejjayo amaanyi gaayo n'ega nti abantu bano abeekozeemu omulimu mwetaaga ki n'etuyambako. Walibadde osanga olwaleero mu ofiisi yaffe wano nga tulinawo department wali ey'abakwasisa amateeka oba ya poliisi oba ya traffic nga bye tukola tubikolera wamu nabo.
Once again, thank you for joining us. In the studio tonight, I am joined, fortunately and unfortunately. Fortunately, because they are the team that is equipped to speak. They are a team that is equipped to speak about this. Unfortunately, because it is a team of 5 men, and not intentionally, we did intend to have some women join us on the panel, but there were cancellations. One of the ladies had to actually cancel because of an emergency. And that's not to take away from the team that we have that's joining us. Let me very quickly introduce them, and I'll start with the team that's in the studio with me. We have Mr. Henry Richard Chimera, who is the team leader at Consumer Center Consent. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure being here tonight.
Also in the studio with me is Mr. Charles Magumba, who is the town clerk for Entebbe. Thank you very much for joining us.
Welcome.
We have 3 gentlemen who will be joining us online, and I'll quickly introduce them. We have 2 from the Kampala Capital City Authority, Mr. Joel Waswa, who is the Manager, Traffic Management and Control. He'll be joining us online and we'll be interfacing with him. I can see him on the screen right now. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Waswa.
Thank you.
And next to him is Mr. Jacob Byamukama, who is the Deputy Director, Roads Management at the Kampala Capital City Authority. Thank you very much for joining us, Jacob.
Thank you, Josephine.
All right, and also joining us with a background that is specific to the conversation that we are going to have is Mr. John Mark Mwanika, who is from Amalgamate Transport and General Workers Union. John Mark, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure, Josephine, to meet you once again.
Let's jump right into our conversation. I'm going to start with you, Mr. Chimera, because you speak for the rest of us. I mean, you speak for all of us who are consumers of public transport. What are some of the transport user challenges that you see, the issues that need to be addressed for regulatory reforms?
To start off, Josephine, I would like to say that consumers are us all. Even the providers of transport services are consumers of goods and services in one way or another. Then even the regulators are also consumers. I will look at transport in its entirety. It could be a border, it could be a taxi, it could be a Uber, a special hire.
If we could zero in on taxis.
Taxis.
Yes.
Thank you.
Where would the greatest challenge be?
The greatest challenge would be unstable transport fares. That would be, today you wake up knowing that I budgeted, I will need 5,000 shillings to one flow. You end up needing 8,000 shillings a day. That is one. Then the other aspects, very quickly, the issues to do with the traffic jams.
Yeah.
That lead, and they are catalysts to the high tax fares. The others, congestions at peak points and drop-off points. Given that even the sizes in one way or another and lack of access for these vehicles at a certain time, there is insecurity, where
true.
there is theft. The other aspect is safety, hygiene. You'll find that some of the vessels or the units that we use, they are hygiene. They are not safe. The infrastructure, where you sit on a seat that might end up pricking you, you might end up with tetanus. The hygiene of the vehicles and the hygiene of the personnel.
Yeah.
So those are some of the things. Then there's another one very quick.
Just on that particular one, also is hygiene, speaking to the current situation we find ourselves in with the pandemic.
That is it.
Okay, carry on.
So the other aspect, there's lack of code of conduct. If you find the language that is within the system, at times you ask yourself, am I going to travel with my daughter or my child? What if a certain wording is chipped in? You get embarrassed when you are with your offsprings traveling on this kind of transport. Then the uncertainty, the delays that we get if I lodge a complaint as a consumer of the transport services. How fast is it resolved?
Who do I lodge a complaint
And
to?
where do I lodge it?
Yes.
This is an aspect where we are lacking consumer complaints handling in this particular transport service. Now, the attitude that we have in there is take it or leave it.
Buy a car if you cannot.
And that's
deal
the
with
language that I was saying.
That you were speaking about.
Go and get your own vehicle if you do not like this.
Thank you very much for setting the tone for the conversation. I actually think it was a good thing that we started with your point of view as a consumer. I think let's move the discussion to the transport workers. And John Mark, I'd like to bring you in. Listening to what Mr. Chimera has just been speaking about, the challenges that the consumers, you are also a consumer regardless of the fact that you are in the transport workers sector. From your perspective, what challenges do you face in determining routes and fares, and what kind of support would you need, for example, from the Ministry of Works or from the Kampala Capital City Authority to regulate these two areas, to make transport user-friendly for all of us, but also to make it friendly for the workers in the sector?
Right now, okay, the service model of especially the taxis and even the border borders is one bit of the puzzle. As you know, right now, there's no schedule. People just provide service at the pleasure of a driver. There's no limit for how many stops they can make. And this is one of the things we're trying to start working with them to change. Actually, there are very good initiatives on how this can be changed. We can want this to be helped on two pronged approaches of regulation. There's regulation that we think can come from government, and I know on this there is already some regulation in it, but I want this to be coupled with what we call self-regulation. And Josephine, the other day I was very happy when I heard the president, when he was relaxing the 42 days lockdown, he referred to two key things: associations and self-regulating. Right now, if you went to those borders, if you went to taxis, they're self-regulating. So self-regulating is one thing that we want government to try and work with these taxis, work with these borders to try and improve and strengthen, because it is a very cheap way of improving on the services. It will not cost much. Actually, it will cost little from government, and we shall have improved regulation. We shall have improved supply and demand. The other one is of course on financing. Whereas, as we talk up to now, the informal transport arena is the only one you can operate without government subsidies. The clamor for buses, the clamor.
Welcome back. Thank you for staying with us. We are coming to you from the Kampala Serena Conference Center, the NTV Uganda studios. And tonight we're speaking about rethinking public transport regulations and what needs to be done. Before the break, the fire was being aimed at KCCA, and I think it always is for most of these conversations. In terms of regulation, who is consulted? Which other stakeholders are involved besides KCCA and the Ministry of Works? I think that's what you were speaking to. So, Jacob, I'll bring you in now. How have transport users, workers, or different other stakeholders been involved in the regulatory process?
Regarding the issue, for example, of fares, and making sure that everyone was involved. The issue of fares, which is countrywide, was led by the Ministry of Local Government. So it had several engagements with all the municipalities, the city, the districts, and they came up with a statutory instrument which was signed just at the beginning of the last lockdown in early 2020. So regarding the fares, in terms of regulation and the involvement of stakeholders, that was Ministry of Local Government. Now, when it goes back, when you come to the routes, it is the Ministry of Works that is leading that effort. The engagements are still ongoing to develop routes, but of course, as KCCA, we helped and led in how routes are supposed to be determined, at least within the metropolitan area, and the engagement to get confirmation, have the final adjustments made, and come up with final regulation that will be implemented using the route chart system that is for which the mandate is for Ministry of Works and Transport, is something that all of us are looking into. We hope to finish this quite soon, and the engagements are going to continue now that we've come out of a complete lockdown. The other people who are very interested in making sure that the route charts exist, for example, the Uganda Police Force. In order to do enforcement, these stakeholders, first of all, the taxi groups and also the Uganda Police Force need to be on one. They need to be on one platform to be able to share information across, and also be able to follow up on who is not following the route chart as has been issued by the Ministry of Works and Transport.
Henry, the floor is yours. You wanted to say something in that regard.
The issue is effective implementation will in one way or another bring about addressing consumer issues. Not only having route charts and numbers, there needs to have an effective consumer complaints handling mechanism. If I complain about anything that happened on the route, this would help to say, color barcode such and such, number such and such at this time, then this would help to trace. And in one way or another, gradually it will bring consumer confidence in the transport sector.
Henry, I'm a consumer as well.
Yes,
and
please.
Maybe you know something I don't. Where do I complain?
It would be in the system within the Ministry of Works. There must be a complaints handling mechanism. And at the local governments, municipality, on the transport division, KCCA should have that too. I would give an example. Uganda Communications Commission started, and they have now a fully fledged consumer affairs department. It was through taking on complaints of consumers. Other regulatory agencies, the Electricity Regulatory Authority has got a complaints mechanism.
Mr. John Mark Mwanika, from the Amalgamated Transport and General Workers Union, maybe you might have an answer for us on where we take our complaints to in this sector.
Actually, what Henry is saying is what is being done, especially for the taxis. There is already a very elaborate complaints mechanism that addresses any complaints of the vehicle crew cheating passengers, a vehicle crew misbehaving, 2, loss of luggage, and 3, maybe even you don't know where to go. There is already an elaborate mechanism at the stage level. On the routes, they have what they call patrol groups, and then at the association at the head, they have an officer dedicated for that. Maybe the only challenge has been that they have not had a lot of publicity about that structure. But if you went to their offices, you will have all these things worked out. Maybe it is a takeaway from my side now to get to them to say this information is not out there. And the other one that is linked to it is that it looks like the consumers, the users, don't take these things seriously, because in some vehicles they have put those numbers for complaint. But I think people just think, if I report, there's nothing these guys can do. So people just don't report, and yet it actually works.
That tells us a lot about the system and perhaps whether or not we trust it. My question next comes to you, Charles, and really this is sort of looking at a way forward so that we're not going back and forth, you know. How best do you think that the challenges that we're all speaking to can be addressed?
I think we're not far away from sorting out public transport. The only issue here would be working together as stakeholders. Both the Amalgamated Workers Union, the Ministry of Works, KCCA. Incidentally, we leave out Ministry of Gender and Labor. But recently when they were asking us to pay tax workers, Ministry of Labor had to give us the workers. So if we bring our energies together, one, I would suggest the following. At registration of the taxi, when this guy is looking for a route chart, let everybody know where this ferry is going to operate. Let the ministry is issuing the route chart. Let the KCCA know that this car starts from Old Park and it goes to Nansana. Let the people in Nansana know that this car actually comes to our area. That involvement, it will be very easy. Then, I know this may take time, but the biggest challenge we have now is the lack of leadership for the taxi industry. There is no proper leadership. Whereas the amalgamated people are telling you there is an elaborate complaint handling system, you will discover that every area has its own leadership. You go to Nansana, you go to Chira, they have their own leadership there, which is not bad. But how do we connect those leadership branches to one area which can solve a problem? And I would suggest that let these guys form circles. For example, Entebbe Stages Circle, but let this circle be registered with the Amalgamated Transport and Workers Union, so that we know that the people in this circle in Entebbe, these are the number of taxis, and these are the guys who work there. This is the driver, this is the conductor, this is the owner of the car. We may leave out the owner of the car because sometimes they hide. But we shall be able to know that this is the group of taxi operators we have in Uganda. So that even when we want to do more regulation, we engage them. When we want to get proper leadership for the taxi industry, we engage them. We are talking of bringing the buses. You can't do it as an individual. If you are in a group, you are a circle, you are under some kind of umbrella, the government will be in a position to negotiate. You would rather be in a position to negotiate with the government and say we have this demand. We want to improve the taxis operating in Kampala to look nice. And we need this support. We need a guarantee. We need bank loan. It will be very easy. But right now, they are operating individually.
I'm going to move to KCCA now to respond to the suggestions that you're making, but also Jacob or Alex, how are you resolving the inconsistent and unrealistic legislation regarding the use of buses in Kampala? You know, for example, the legal status of Tondeka, it remains unclear to a lot of us up to now. But my other question to you is the legal status of KCCA, which is unclear to municipalities, and it leads to different lines of accountability and revenue sharing within the greater Kampala metropolitan area.
Ministry of Kampala and Metropolitan Affairs, together with the Ministry of Local Government and Ministry of Works and Transport, who have been working hand in hand, and an interministerial committee was put in place to try and collect all the views of the different stakeholders in the public transport industry. And for now, on the side of local government, it has mainly been the Ministry of Local Government and the Ministry of Works and Transport who have been spearheading this. On the side of KCCA, our mandate is a bit limited to the boundaries and jurisdictions of the KMP, who is in charge of policy formulation and regulation, has taken the lead role as the team leader for all these public transport reforms. And this is provided for under their mandate. Thank you, Joseph.
You said something there about the interministerial and agency cooperation, and my next question will come from there. What do you think we should do? What should be done to encourage the interministerial and governance and metropolitan transport planning? You also did not speak to the status of the Tondeka buses.
First of all, maybe this is like information that the Ministry of Works and Transport is the one that is really at the center of organizing at least the leadership of the sector. They are handling what you call a regulation or a statutory instrument that is going to bring into force or bring into effect the associations of taxi operators and the owners. So that statutory instrument is also still in discussion with all the stakeholders. And once it comes out, it's going to bring about the associations that Henry was talking about that are required to deal with all the issues that consumers suffer. But once they are more organized, then, like the town clerk said, they can be financed. So once those associations are in place, then we expect at least the sector now to grow, to become more formalized, and for people within those associations to follow the rules, to follow the regulations, and to be able to attract financing, get better vehicles, and provide for the passenger a better service that they can enjoy. Now, when we go to the buses, for the buses to come in, and this is really where we are going. So we start with formalization of the industry, having taxis that have numbers. You don't have touts. People can start getting used to seeing a number, and they know where the route is, which route they are going to use. Then with the demand, Joel talked about it earlier, the demand along those routes can determine that we need a bigger vehicle than what is being used, so that we don't have so many small vehicles on a route. For example, in Entebbe route, there's a lot of demand there, but you use the numbers to determine where you should have bigger vehicles. The bigger vehicles, of course, are buses as we keep on growing to manage the demand, but use also the limited space we have. We don't have a lot of space. The Tondeka has allied or has formed a partnership with the Kira Motors, which was visited by the president, I think, last weekend. They have a factory that is going to manufacture buses. So they are looking at delivering some buses, I think, on the network. But again, we still have to have answers. Who are they going to replace? How do we do it in an orderly manner so that there's not a lot of impact in that? The 1,000 buses are supposed to be delivered in 24 months. So there's some light at the end of the tunnel, but we need to move in an organized way. And of course, engagements with the whole sector are still going on.
Thank you very much, Jacob. You gave really great answers, but also raised some questions that I thought you'd be answering for us. And you also spoke as if you were signing out. We are still here at least for the next couple of minutes, so don't go anywhere. Let's take a short break and we'll be right back. Welcome back. Thank you for staying with us. Tonight we're speaking about rethinking public transport regulations and what needs to be done. And in closing the show, I have 5 guests and very little time. I will go to you, John Mark, actually, if you can hear me on the screen. And I'd like to hear from you what are some of the best transport workers organization practices that we can adopt here to ensure a unified representation of workers' concerns and subsequently a successful multimodal transport system.
We're adopting what we call an incremental approach to adopting best practices, because I've had opportunity to work across the globe on this informal transport, and there is no one-fit-all kind of solution. There is no magic bullet. Actually, the Uganda scenario looks to be better to be worked on than in most cities, which are large and complicated with bigger issues than ours. So what we're trying to propose in Kampala, working with the administrative units, could be the way to go. One, we're not talking about transformation, we're talking about improvement. I want to thank, first of all, the town clerk in Entebbe and the leadership of Entebbe Municipal Council for working with us to improve the working relationship between the several groups that were there in Entebbe. Right now, as I speak, I think they're slowly coming to work as a team, and we're working towards getting the town council with the leadership of town clerk to get them to manage the town, the newly refurbished or built taxi park. Now, we can only succeed there if Kampala is also done well. Just like town clerk was saying, destination and origin. Because if there's confusion in the origin, then even at the destination, there's go. So we think that we shall want to come to Kampala. We've already identified about 50 stages. We've done 15 that answer real questions that town clerk and Henry have referred to of organization and strengthening those groups. The other key thing we're looking at is data.
Yeah.
I have a saying that says that you can't be counted, you can't be consulted if you're not counted. If you don't know how many numbers of taxi drivers are there, how many numbers of conductors are there, how many numbers of boda are there, you can't then blame anybody for not working with you. So we're building a database, computerized, of the taxi industry, giving us an actual near picture of what is there so that we are able to have informed decisions.
John Mark, do we have any figures at present? Do we have any numbers to speak of?
Currently, we have loose numbers. For example, the taxi, we have a number of around 23,000,
wow,
which is conductors and the drivers. However, those are active. However, at every stage, they have about 3 what they call spare drivers. 3. And the number is growing of those spare drivers who are just seated waiting for, okay, Jacob is going for a meeting, let me drive his car. They don't want responsibility, because you as a driver, you're responsible for my car. But if you give somebody who's not responsible, it can be reckless on the road, knock anybody, and even run away.
Charles, I'm coming to you now for your closing remarks. What do you think we should be doing? What should be done to encourage the interministerial and agency cooperation to reduce the tensions and the disputes over greater Kampala metropolitan governance and transport planning?
I think our ministers are working out on this. They have been handling. We have been engaged several times, and for me, my take would be, the ministers will give us directions and even give the kind of guidelines. But unless the user, the industry players, are organized from the grassroots, we shall continue having these challenges. Like I said, let us organize these operators from their areas, so that they are organized, they come up as an umbrella, and then they can be able to hold a leadership election, which is guided by the regulations that the Minister of Works is trying to come up with. Without that, we shall continue having problems. You know, leadership, everybody wants leadership, but we must create a structure which will guide in coming up with that leadership. But the other thing which I also want to talk about, as we plan to improve the industry, we need to do more. We need to improve the infrastructure, the roads. You saw the Kampala roads are well paved, but get out of Kampala. That's the problem. So under the Greater Kampala Metropolitan Economic Plan, we are trying to come up with the connectivity. How best can we do the roads around Kampala, so that the transport and the and the connections are easy. You know, there are people, when somebody is going to Wai, you say, why would we go through Kampala? Somebody is going to Mukono, why would we go through Kampala? This is the congestion you get.
In the CBD.
In the CBD. And then lastly, this one is far-fetched, but it is important. The physical planning.
Yeah.
The upcoming areas around Kampala should improve on the physical plan. Our settlement patterns are confused. You find people living along the road. So even if you do the expressway, nobody will pass there because they are going to Najanankumbi. People are talking of London. These are villages organized. You talk of China, these are organized towns. Physical planning was done before. So the roads are really connecting. You find, you're talking of a bus number. Bus number will go to Wise and then stop in Rupogoba and do what? So we need to do physical planning so that our settlement patterns are well organized.
Right.
And that's the best way we shall improve our transport.
Thank you very much, Charles, for your additions to this conversation. I'm coming to you now, Henry.
Yes,
as a user, what do you want? And when we look at all of the issues that are coming up in this conversation, how do we get the users' voices into the conversation?
First and foremost, I think what we will need to do with all sectors to put up consumer affairs units where consumers would go. I like John saying that there is an elaborate complaints mechanism. Consumers want to report if they don't have a trust and confidence in a system. If I'm abused at this stage, how will I complain to somebody who has abused me? So, effective, independent consumer complaints mechanisms, quality management, looking at consumer satisfaction, regular consumer perception surveys, coming out to ask, Josephine, how did you like your transport? Where can we improve? Gradually responding to the consumer voices when the information is picked by the local authorities, by the transport ministry, by the city authorities, and the associations themselves. Without consumers, there is no transport business. Okay? Then regular consumer service provider dialogues, discussions constantly. Where can we improve? So as a consumer, that's what I would wish to have a listening ear. And that listening ear that is responsive. This will help to grow our business and our sector where consumers have got confidence and trust the system because they are listened to.
Well said, Henry. Thank you very much for speaking for the consumers. Henry is the team leader at Consumer Consent. So thank you for sharing your thoughts. To KCCA, to also close the conversation, two questions for you, perhaps one for Joel and the other one will come to you, Jacob. Question one, the taxi and border sectors are organizationally very fragmented. Are there any solutions or future regulatory plans about this that KCCA has that the public should know about? And the second question, are there any future regulatory plans or reforms that the public should know about, short-term, medium-term, long-term? In closing, in just about a minute or two, if you could speak to us on the two of those aspects. Joel.
Currently, there are ongoing plans for regulation of border industry, and the same with the taxis. We have an interministerial committee had been set up to handle the issue of registration of borders. And the initial stages we began with basically identification of stages in the various areas and also registration. It was very unfortunate that during the COVID period, much of this exercise.
We've lost our team there. What I will do is pose those questions to John Mark. John Mark, if you can hear me, you will wrap our conversation up with future plans in the transport sector.
I have about 3 key future plans. One is modernizing the current fleet. It's a key part of the future plans we're thinking about, and that's why we need them into circles or groups where they have collective muscle to raise funding when you link them to financing, we have local banks that are ready to finance. Two, we're thinking of consolidating and strengthening the existing structures within the industry. I'm talking about the stages at the park level and the association level. Make them more democratic, have them get legitimacy among the membership, and also train them on basic financial literacy. Josephine, I'll tell you, you guys have their taxes, but they don't know how much they're making. So they even don't know that they're making a loss. So just literary training on basic financial management. The other one is moving away, it's a big one, but close to my heart, moving away from, or moving towards what we can call the low or zero carbon emission. Already we have inroads in the border where we have the Zombo border, electric border coming online. And we think that we can start looking at how the taxis can also, like, you know, Kira Motors is here with us. Why then can taxis also be powered by some other source of power? So this all is what we're looking at. Then we're looking at going digital. You know, passenger is to connect from a feeder route to the main. We think that you don't need to pay every other time. You can pay once and get maybe to the destination by changing 3 or 2 cars, but without paying much.
John Mark, we've unfortunately run out of time, but I think we've gotten the 3 key issues that you wanted to raise, and what I see from this conversation, it begs a bigger conversation on the same. It's difficult to speak through all the issues to do with transport and future plans in, what, 45 minutes. So thank you so much, all of you, for taking the time to speak with us. Mr. John Mark Mwanika, Mr. Joel Wasa from KCCA, Jacob Yamkama from KCCA, Mr. Charles Magumba, the Town Clerk of Entebbe, and Mr. Henry Richard Chimera, the team leader at Consumer Center. Coming up is NTV Weekend Edition.